Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to today's session. I am Hifza Pervez, very delighted to be hosting today's conversation. By profession, I am an engineer based in Dubai, and beyond my work, I do run a support group with a friend of mine for the women who have faced domestic abuse in one way or the other, and they are now in their journey of healing and self-love and self-empowerment and whatnot. Hosting such kind of a session is first for me, which makes it even more exciting to share this journey with all of you. Today, we are going to dive into the topic that touches everyone's life, and that's obviously relationships. We are going to explore three core areas regarding relationship that are very essential for building and maintaining um, healthy connections, from understanding relationship dynamics from to improving communication metrics, and then managing the conflicts constructively, whether it's with a partner or with a family member, friends or colleague. All of these elements play a very crucial role in our ability to build up and maintain a very supportive relationship. The goal of this session is to obviously create awareness, share practical insights on how to navigate, strengthen, and resolve the challenges that all of us face in our daily lives. But beyond that, I would also like to highlight the importance and emphasize that why these open discussions and learning opportunities like these valuable things especially would be important for those who still think that viewing therapy would be a taboo, or the people who are self-aware of their problems but they are shy to initiate the therapy, and also especially for the people who do want to take professional support to be a better versions of themselves but they lack the resources towards it. So for that purpose, I am very honored to be joined by Dr. Bilal Shadani. A little bit of his introduction: he has a master's in clinical psychiatry from Cardiff University, and he's a GHR UK certified psychotherapist with multiple certifications in multiple therapy modules and techniques. He had a previous career in the law as a divorce attorney, and he did face a lot of things and saw that how poorly the legal outcomes would leave a couple mentally and otherwise during the whole process. So he used his experience in divorce counseling in pursuing therapy training, certifications, and registrations from Kent, after which he started his own psychotherapy practice in Dubai. Now expanding his practice, he has now moved to Islamabad, Pakistan, where he's a very good practicing psychotherapist in Maroof International Hospital. He has taken multiple training in three areas, from marriage and relationship counseling, addiction therapy for treatment of common addictions from smoking to alcohol and many other addictives, and modular therapy for social neurosis such as anxiety and depression. Specifically trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, and neurolinguistic programming in clinical therapy. Well, he'll be bringing with a lot of wealth of insights into what truly makes relationship work, and will be sharing practical tips and strategies that we all can use into our daily life. Not delaying, welcomes Dr. Bilal into the conversation. How are you
Oh,
doing?
thank you, Hifsa. I hope it wasn't too much of a mouthful with all the stuff that
It's a
my
lot
history
of things.
brings.
You managed to do a lot of things.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but here we go. Yeah, no, it's always been strange to me how people always talk about mental health, this and suicide and whatnot, but very rarely have I ever encountered a conversation that's centered on relationships specifically, and how the dynamics there can affect mental health. Always been a
Obviously, it
little
would be a
strange to me.
preventive way to, prevent all of the later things.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well,
So yeah, let's
how,
just get
how,
right into it, I guess.
how's the weather in Islamabad, by the way?
Oh, it's getting cold. I'm pretty sure the hoodie that I have on right now should kind of give it away. Yeah, there's a bit of a bite in the air here. So
Okay. I do
I do
miss
miss Dubai
Islamabad.
weather though. I
Oh,
do miss the
I miss
Dubai weather.
Islamabad. Islamabad's weather is the best.
Ah, well, fair enough, I suppose. Could use a little heat though, but there we go.
Okay, so well, let's get right into it. Can you start by telling us a bit about the common relationship dynamics that you have personally experienced in your practice, and do tell us that why is it so important to understand all of these dynamics in your own relationships?
So the thing is that I think it's important to actually say that the one of the largest dynamics that needs addressing for any relationship, even if it's not necessarily romantic, is that you must have your boundaries. If you don't discuss your boundaries, or if you haven't thought about what your boundaries are, your relationship is going to suffer with a lot of conflict. Not necessarily bad conflict, but conflict nonetheless. And the thing is that, unfortunately, at least from the South Asian lens, boundaries are not something that are typically taught, at least not healthy boundaries. Unhealthy boundaries are significantly more common in that, I'll give you a nice easy one, for example, always respect your elders, which is problematic because, again, through a cultural lens, disagreement is treated as disobedience.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the problem with that is that is not a sustainable model for any healthy relationship. There will be disagreement. There will be times where you are unable to reach a consensus. That does not mean that the other person is somehow being disobedient or disrespectful, right? So the thing is, it's super duper duper important that, for dynamics, that you have your boundaries worked out. Boundaries exist in two forms mostly. But before I get into that, it's important to highlight that a boundary is not what people think it is. Many times couples come in, or even individuals come in, ask them, can you define what a boundary is? And they often say, oh, it's just something that you don't want the other person to do. To which I often say, congratulations, you got it wrong. That's not a boundary, right? A boundary is explicitly telling It's explicitly telling the other person an undesirable behavior and the consequence if they engage in that behavior. If you do not highlight what the consequence is, it is not a boundary, it's a preference, right? So, for example, don't raise your voice to me, or because if you do, I won't continue this conversation. Very easy example of a small boundary. There must, and you have to communicate it. You cannot assume the other person knows it, because unfortunately they have the defense of, well, you didn't tell me, which admittedly is a bit of a cop-out.
Everyone's boundaries are different. It's a variation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Which actually is a good segue into the two kinds of boundaries, which are negotiable and non-negotiable. Non-negotiables will basically define the outer limits of your relationship, so no lying, no disrespect, or whatever it is that you want that way. And negotiable ones are the ones where you can adjust what the consequences are right then and there. Non-negotiable will always have the same consequences no matter what. And there's no exceptions to that. Non-negotiables are literally, you do it, we're done, get out. Whereas negotiable is, okay, this time we can do this, next time we can do that.
Yeah.
And it's important to start with these two because they give you a guideline as to how to construct, whatever it is that is important to you in the relationship. So no lying, no disrespect are two very, very easy ones to have. Assuming, of course, that you're looking for that. I have met couples where I've been told, oh no, it's fine if there are small lies, which, okay, more power to them, I suppose. I certainly couldn't do it. So yeah, this is just a small taster for the kind of dynamic work that needs doing usually, right?
I have two questions with this conversation, so I'll start with the one. So, for example, you talked about boundaries, and there is a factor of relationship dynamics. What I have read that every person is associated with a certain kind of personality attachment style, and I would like to know two things. One, is it true that all of these attachment styles you begin to get it, or you begin to have it as a part of your personality in your early life, depending upon the relationship that you have with your primary caregiver or your parents or your family? And second, that once you are aware, or once you are realizing the attachment style of your own self, what is your attachment style, and on the person that you are dealing with, it can be romantic partner or anyone else, how do you deal with such kind of attachment styles, and how do you get better? Because obviously I think there can be a best kind of attachment style as well. How do you reach to that stage?
Sure. So essentially there are 4 attachment styles, and while you're generally correct in that they arise when you're young, there are variables that need consideration. So let's start with if not necessarily the most desirable, the healthiest one. It's the secure attachment style, which is characterized by the individual being self-confident. They understand their own self-worth, and they're open to asking for help from their partner, which many people are just like, well, that's normal. Not really, no, because the thing is, some individuals are very averse to that. They think that it makes them weak, or whatever they bring. So this, generally speaking, these are the ones that have the most openly communicable relationships and whatnot. After that, you have the anxious attachment style, which is characterized by a person who's quite clingy. They're highly emotional, and they're constantly seeking reassurance. Do you love me? This isn't too much, is it? Like, is it okay if I do this? Why? Because generally
Validation,
speaking,
yes. Okay.
yeah, so there's a very strong validation seeking model in their mind. So everything will have either an appeasing nature. Is it okay if we, or it's just, constantly sort of, you won't leave me, right? You won't leave me, right? You won't leave me. And obviously it gets quite stressful that way. After that, you have the avoidant, which is someone who does not communicate very openly. They seem quite stoic. They seem quite unemotional. They're, if a nice small example, if you try holding their hand, they're just like they kind of push that kind of intimacy away. But they'll openly talk about problems. Otherwise, they'll be very practical, but emotional, not really. Perhaps the most undesirable one, I suppose, is the disorganized style. Very intense, very sort of hot and cold in the relationship. One day it's full
Yeah.
passion, the other it's stone cold. There's a push-pull dynamic where it's just like, I hate you, don't leave me. So, which
Two
is,
poles
wait, what?
apart each day.
Yeah, and it's tremendously unpredictable in what is going on. So it's the conflict is very, very erratic, and there's no real way to predict whether you're in a good place or not.
Yeah.
Now, with regards to when these develop, well, essentially your model for how your relationships build starts as early as 5 to 7 years old, because that's the time where you're very reliant on your parents for security, safety, food, etc. So whatever their model, their dynamics, their communication dynamics are with you will form the basis. So if your parents were very sort of, don't go here without telling me, don't do that without telling me, don't do this, it's very likely you're going to become anxious. You're going to have the anxious attachment because you're constantly going to be like, is it okay? Is it okay? Is it okay? Whereas if they tell you, no, just fine, go do whatever, just let us know if you're going to do it. And they're very open-handed that way. And yeah, sure, it's very likely you'll develop a secure style. I should say, however, secure style, it's unusual to have it young, mostly because, again, as you're growing up, and you reach puberty and then you start sort of, creating your own identity, there's that conflict that comes up because you're going to push against your home rules versus the rules of your friend circle. So you're going to struggle there a little bit. You're going to try and push and pull. The secure attachment usually comes about as a result of someone who's either seen sort of, where they're lacking, and in their relationships they develop healthy boundaries and they do the work. Or, I'll be honest, if you're fortunate enough to have parents like that, then, good for you. That's not really the norm. But the rest of them are, very, very common that way because people do get stuck then. If they're, for example, an anxious attachment style can maybe be rewarded if you have someone who has a similar anxious style as well. You might be rewarded for it. I love you if you love me. As long as you don't leave me, we're good, So it depends heavily on the variables that are involved that way. There's nothing that says that you cannot get through this. You talked about self-awareness. Yeah, self-awareness goes a long way. If you know that this is something that needs work, then yeah, great. Ideally, a therapist would be your best, sort of place to go to deal with this efficiently. But friends and family can do it too if they're appropriately emotionally intelligent. So, but again, like I said earlier, the variables are a big thing to consider here, right?
But talking about being self-aware or understanding that you have a specific attachment style that needs working on if you want to have a healthy relationship with anyone. But as I talked about in the start of the purpose of this session, there are so many people who don't consider therapy as a
Mhm.
helpful thing for their own whatever reason. But in that case, if you are dealing with a potential partner, I'll just talk about a
Mhm.
romantic partnership right here. If you're dealing with a certain partner that you can realize that it is their specific attachment style and they are not on the same page of working on it with you, then what do you do then?
Okay,
How do you
so
deal with such situation?
so the thing is that at day's end, the person has to do the work. Having a supportive partner or just any kind of support network in general is always preferable,
Yeah.
but it's not to say that they can't do it alone. Now, admittedly, one of the most common problems I encounter is that, so why'd you come to my clinic? Oh, my wife told me to. My wife tells me I need to, or my husband tells me I need to. To which my reaction is, look, if you don't want to be here, here's your refund, leave. I'm not gonna engage with someone who doesn't want it themselves, because if you don't want it, the efficacy of the exercises plummets.
I think
It just
it's like the placebo effect. If you personally don't want
absolutely,
it, it's not going to have any
yeah.
effect.
Again, because no, it becomes a bit of a, it's just a band-aid. It's not actually treating the issue, because then they go home, see, I did what you said, now it's not working. It's because, why would it? So instead, I would often say that, look, if they want it, great. If they don't want it, don't nag, and see how you can work with it together. Because one of my favorite things to say to a lot of couples is either you grow together or you grow apart. Right? You have to keep pace with each other in some fashion. One of you might be a little further ahead, maybe emotionally, maybe career-wise, whatever. But if you're so far ahead that you have nothing in common, you've got a problem, because then you're growing apart. And if one person is disinterested, I wouldn't say unable, I would say disinterested in addressing something that's affecting the relationship, that can often become a red flag. In and of itself is not a red flag. Some people are just lazy, or maybe they're not ready. But support and I would say encouraging them, not even forcing them or ultimatum, no ultimatums. They go a long way. And I've often said this to a lot of clients as well. Look, worst case scenario, you're gonna go for 1 hour and you never have to come back. Best case scenario, you go in and you will never have this problem again. But the rest is on you. That's up to you, right? I find that to be very convincing for people who are reluctant. So yeah.
So moving past the attachment styles, you talked about boundaries and especially healthy boundaries. Please
Yeah.
do tell us how to actually identify the healthy boundaries. I'm talking about the negotiable one, because
Yeah, sure.
non-negotiable one, I think they're universal, but the
Mm,
negotiable one, how do we
sure.
actually identify them and be
Mm.
can make it a part of our relationship?
Okay. So the thing is that an easy point of reference. How do you know the difference between a negotiable and a non-negotiable boundary? Well, negotiable boundaries are everything that the non-negotiable is not. So, for example, I often encourage my clients to have 3 non-negotiables, to which they're usually like, well, why 3? Why not 5? Why not 7? Well, if you have more than 3, then it's not really guidelines for the relationship, it's a shopping list. And most people would be very reluctant to even engage with you if, you have to be this
Yeah,
tall,
it's
you
on
have
the
to,
checklist,
you
yes.
know, yeah. So that's that. But then they often say, okay, but why not just 1 or 2? Well, because no relationship can exist in binary, in black or white. That's not how it works, right? So you need to have a nice little open space where you can actually see the room for operation. Now, negotiable boundaries are everything else. So, for example, something that a lot of partners go through. Let's say the husband's friends are coming in from town. It's the first time in 4 years, and he's very excited. And he's told his partner, "I'm going out this day." Unfortunately, she gets unwell, or maybe she has a particularly distressing period, and she says, "Honey, can you stay?" And he says, "It's the boys. They're here 4 years. Is it okay? Well, when can you come back? Well, do you want me home early? Because I don't think early." She's like, "Can you be home by, let's say, I don't know, 11?" And he's like, "It's the boys. And can I come home by 12?" She's like, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." Notice what you're doing. You're adjusting, the consequence. Yes. So, and that's essentially it. Anything you can negotiate about. Let's say that the same thing happens again. A few years later, the same thing happens, but she's fine. She's not unwell. She says, "Yeah, go out, enjoy yourself. Come home late if you want to." It's the same situation with a different outcome. Why? Negotiable. Anything where you are open to that does not conflict with the non-negotiables of the relationship. The generic ones that I often give as an example are there's no lying. You do not lie at all, because that's no. 2, there's no disrespect. There's no yelling. There's no cursing. There's no name calling. 3, you do not arbitrarily use religion to motivate any kind of hard boundaries. You can't go to work because it's not religious or what. No, it doesn't work like that, because these are all very, very obvious. They will cause conflict at some point or another, right? Now, with regards to this, there's also 4 pillars for a healthy relationship that you must discuss that can guide your boundary work. So, in no particular order, finances. You absolutely must discuss your finances with each other in a transparent fashion. I've always asked a lot of my clients that, look, if we're talking about boundaries and stability, did you ever talk about money? Yeah, we talk about it all the time. Did you talk about having a joint bank account? No. So why not? One of you is not working, the other is. Why isn't there a joint bank account? And then obviously it opens up the floor for communication. So, stuff like that. 1. 2 is spirituality or religion. If you're interfaith, then yeah, spirituality. If you're of the same faith, then religion. Fine. For example, if we take a Muslim couple, one is practicing, one is not as practicing. Let's say, does the person who's not practicing wake up for sehri? Do they make iftari? Do they eat separately? Do they not? Do they pray together? What? How does that work? Right. So that's religion and spirituality. 3 is intimacy. Intimacy does not mean sex. Intimacy means, how do you express vulnerability? How do you talk about when you're upset? How do you talk about romance? That will come afterwards. The intimacy component comes, like the physical component comes much later, because that will be enhanced once you have the emotional part. The 4th one, which a lot of people are not surprised by, is children. Are we going to have children? Because sometimes they say, no, we don't want kids. That doesn't mean that this pillar has failed. It just means that you will change the question to, okay, what are we going to do with all the time, energy, and money we have saved not having children? Are we going to invest? Are we going to open a business? Are we going to travel? What? And if you are going to have children, are you going to go naturally? Are you going to use IVF? What's the spacing between the children? What's the parenting styles that you're going to use? Social media rules, tablet usage, friends, dating, all of these things. You have to have all 4 of these things transparently covered with each other so you understand where you are, because they will dictate the boundaries that you employ, not only with each other as a couple, but eventually when you transition into parenthood. So you got to make sure that, all of this is worked out. These are negotiable, obviously, because every couple is different. And that's why these are used as a good sort of starting point for stability. Because once these are done, a lot of your conflict is resolved. Right?
I will be talking about more in details when I come to the point of conflict management. But at this point, considering the relationship dynamics, we have talked about attachment styles, we have talked about healthy boundaries, how to create them, how to manage them. But if it's still it doesn't work out, obviously things sometimes don't work out. When it's the right time to understand that this is the time that you need to let go of the person, and it can be any person. It can be from friends to a partner to a colleague or a job. When is the time to let go?
Okay, so a good rule of thumb is that if the relationship isn't offering you any real support or benefit, you might want to evaluate if it's worth keeping. Now, obviously, there's different dynamics that exist for friends, for romantic relationships, and familial relationships. So let's start with the romantic ones, because admittedly, this is the one most people kind of cut off from. If the relationship isn't suiting you, if there's more conflict than there is actual sort of connection, yeah, you might want to have a conversation on why that's happening, because conflict in and of itself, like you said, is not necessarily something that's bad. And I'll go more into this when we talk conflict. But maybe your method of communication could use work and the conflict isn't bad, right? But again, if it's not serving you, if you're not happy in the romantic relationship, consider how it's serving you and how it's not. Fine. With friends, it's a little easier, mostly because there's significantly more evidence that you can lean on to find out if that's worth pursuing or not. Because again, do you like hanging out with them? Do they respect you? Do they support you? Or are they only there when things are good? Are they only there for you when it's easy? Because friendships that are easy, they're not worth having. It's the weight of a friendship can be measured in how much they've supported you during difficult times, and it goes both ways.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think you keep the friends. They were worth more keeping, that you find it in your difficult times.
Absolutely. With family, it's problematic because, again, South Asian lens, which has been hammered into your mind since you're literally able to speak. You don't leave family. You do not leave family. You do not leave family. The problem, unfortunately, with that narrative again is toxic relationships exist as well. So, and when I'm asked that, oh, but I have a really toxic, objectively a toxic family relationship, how do I leave? I use the metaphor by asking them, well, what do you do when you have an appendix problem? You cut it out. I was like, yes, because it's toxic, it's poisoning, it's slowly killing you. Toxic relationships are the same way. You only get one family the same way you only get one appendix, but you cut out the appendix the moment it becomes toxic. Not everyone's appendix, not everyone has, an appendectomy. Not everyone's appendix goes bad, right? But the ones that do, you cut it out. And it's difficult. But at day's end, again, to go back to what I said earlier, look at the relationship and see if it's serving you in any positive fashion. What was there is in the past. Talk about the present. What is it giving you in the present that would make you say, okay, maybe I'll stick it out, right? So I would say that the best rule of thumb is, again, what's it giving you? What is it giving you, and is it worth keeping? Right? So that.
Okay. So I'll move to the communication part of the conversation. I think this is the part where everyone gets stuck the most, because they
Right.
are already some way emotionally attached with the person and they do want to work it on, but there are certain variables that are in picture. And for starters, I would also say that I personally have been using the word communication, I don't know for how long, but there is still some gap in terms of communicating things to each other, where we are lacking either one person by communicating it well or the other person by taking it well. So what's the importance of communication in a relationship? Because I think, in my personal opinion, this is the phase where you get stuck the most, where you don't know where you are leading towards and what's your state currently.
Okay. So I'm actually glad that you bring this up. So to go back to when we were talking about boundaries, when you know your boundaries, you can create the appropriate expectations, right? Because, and this is something a lot of people don't seem to realize, is that your expectations are in direct correlation to the boundaries that you communicate to each other. So when you say that I struggle to communicate or someone struggles to communicate, I will usually ask them, okay, so what are your expectations from your partner? Right? And then they will say something and the other person just looks at them saying, where did you come up with that? That makes no sense. Why would I do that? Or how can you believe that? And at that point, it's just, okay, so it's very clear that there's something going on here that was either not communicated or was misunderstood. Just because there's a communication issue does not mean that the relationship is doomed to failure. That's not what it means. It just means that perhaps, A is being said, B is being heard, and then C is being replied. And to which the reaction is, but I never said that. Right? So it makes more sense to me to ask the person that, okay, if you're not understanding what I'm trying to say, or if maybe I'm unable to communicate to you what I'm trying to say, here is what I expect, right? And then the other person can start asking you questions, saying that, why do you expect this? Where did this come from? Why this, that? And it brings it back down to a more, smaller way of communicating what it is you're looking for. But again, if, for example, if you're in a relationship where both of you are working double shifts because financially you're not that strong, neither of you can reasonably expect a Rolex watch for your birthday or a vacation trip around the world, because no, you both, but assuming you both know that, if one of you is just out of nowhere creating this expectation, you're in for a bad time, one. Once your expectations are set, then you can move on to deciding what your mutual goals for the relationship are. And that's, again, a communication exercise. What is it that you're hoping to achieve now that you're together? And mind you, this can only happen if your boundaries are clear and your expectations are clear. This cannot happen if the other two are vague or undecided. So, the two examples I often give, the first one is we both want to immigrate. One of you is a PhD holder with no employment history, but the other one is an undergrad holder with 15 years running a successful business. How do we leverage these two resources to get out? right? And the thing is that you can do that very easily. You can communicate to each other because your expectations are good, your boundaries are good, and therefore your goals can align. More typically and more commonly, the second one is, oh, we want to start a family together. So like I said earlier, is it natural conception, or are you considering maybe using, IVF or whatever? Spacing, whatnot. Is one of you a child of divorce? How does that affect your parenting? If the other one came from a typical home, mother and father unit, all of that. All of this, if you can talk about your boundaries, if you can talk about your expectations, it does ease up communication. But I'm guessing you're probably going to be asking about conflict, how to navigate. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, so go ahead. What do you want to ask about conflict?
Before moving to the conflict, I'll stick to this point of communication. For example, you talked about having 4 pillars to talk about while you are meeting a person, let's say. I'll talk about dating, because that is the point where you can define your boundary, that if I should meet this person more or not, because there are still some negotiable for you, some non-negotiable. And I think even there are still a few deal breakers apart from negotiables that differ from person to person.
Oh, yeah.
So like you talk about 4 pillars of a relationship in the start. That seems ideal, but it's usually not the case, because I have personally experienced it, that dynamics of meeting a person, the dynamics of dating, it's chaotic. So apart from these 4 pillars, how do you identify that you should waste time? I won't use the waste time. I would say invest time in a person to see if it can be good in the future or not.
So the thing is that initially, when it comes to meeting a person, if we're talking about, because in today's day and age, obviously the apps are pretty popular. I'm of the opinion that they've ruined dating, generally speaking, but then again, everyone has their opinions. But when it comes to the apps, one mistake a lot of people typically make is they spend too much time on the app and too much time not meeting each other. I think, I mean, don't quote me on this one, but I think the studies have said that you should try and meet each other within 2 days of matching, within 2 days. And try and save the heavy conversation for the actual meet, because body language is super important.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, with cell phones and all these other communication methods, we lose body language, so we can misinterpret a lot. In terms of the connection, well, the first thing is that you need to be super duper clear what it is you're looking for. Are we looking for casual? Are we looking for hookup? Are we looking for long-term leading to marriage? Are we straight up talking about marriage? What is it that you're bringing to the table, right? And that's a question that I'm a big fan of asking very early on. Like,
There are very subtle responses that you get before that question.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Take it easy. Let's see where it goes. Go with the flow, and so many subtle sentences that you wouldn't know how to answer.
Well, no. The thing is that for example, if someone says that, it's a little too early for this conversation, and if you're satisfied with that answer, then more power to you. If you're not satisfied, I would go back to, again, maybe it's important to sort of put it on the table that, I'll go with this. Maybe we'll meet up one more time, do dinner, hang out, whatever. But I'm not going to allow myself to be in a situation where I don't have clarity. Right? I'm more than happy to give 1, 2, 3. Just again, make sure that there's a cutoff, right? Because at day's end, if this is someone who's just in for a good time, and you're not interested in a good time, you're interested for something long term, I would ask you if this is something you're willing to engage with. Because again, if you're willing to, beg your pardon?
Consent is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not on board with it, that's fine. No one's putting a gun to your head that way. It depends, obviously, on chemistry, which is, again, why it's very important to meet as quickly as possible. I'm not a big fan of heavy conversations on text or WhatsApps or, Telegram or whatever. I'm a big fan of that. Plus, again, it's important to kind of ask those questions again. Where do you see yourself going? What's your most cherished memory growing up? These kind of things will help sort of help you understand the other person. And again, if you ask in the present, you will get a very present-minded answer. But if you ask in the past, it gives you a good insight into where they were and where they've come. So, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what's your favorite childhood memory? Because it gives you so much insight into, oh, I grew up in Africa. Really? You were in Africa? What were you doing there? Oh, yeah, I grew up there. And we would go to the beach and what. It gives you so much to talk about. Admittedly, I can understand why some people would be reluctant to share something this personal, especially early on. They might be reluctant. And that's perfectly fine. You're allowed to gatekeep how much information you share. Again, and if someone, like for example, let's say that you're very serious about wanting long-term, and he asked you this question, but he said, I want casual. Yeah, no, I'll answer this when, I have a sense of direction, because I don't really know where this is going, and I don't want to kind of overshare these personal things. You're allowed to do that. You see, because a lot of people get caught up with the confusion of, wait, what is this? Situationships.
I hate that word.
Yeah, I know. It's nightmarish to deal with when somebody comes to you for, relationship therapy. Okay, so are you with someone? Well, maybe. Okay, so, it's like being pregnant. You are or you're not. You're not kind of halfway in between.
No,
So
the problem is that the word situationship, or the feeling that maybe or may not be, it's
yeah,
very long. You are
yeah,
not just unclear for a day or two, you are unclear
correct.
for months.
Exactly, and that's why I say that again, being open at the start, saying, "Look, I'll give this one, maybe two, but after that, if there's no clarity for me, I'll just step out." Don't even put it on them. Just step yourself out, because
Yeah,
why should you feel bad about wasting your time?
yeah,
At day's end, look, we don't have time to waste when it comes to this stuff. Maybe in your teen years and maybe your early 20s, but after that, life gets very serious very quickly. Right? And it's important that you are with someone who's like-minded in all the right things. Maybe also in the wrong things, if you want, but mostly in the right things.
yeah,
So I would say that, yeah, no, you should absolutely be clear about your expectations from day one. If the other person is still kind of wishy-washy, again, I would say it's up to you, because the more space that you give them, the longer you're going to be in that space of, well, why am I here?
yeah.
Right?
So, before moving to the conflict, one final question of, a little tips to
Hmm.
improve my communication, especially, but when I talk about meeting a person, I think I
Hmm.
can have that, I can have my own space of talking about things. But with all the people in your life, there are sometimes not space enough to, loud out your voice. So
Yeah.
how do I make sure that I am, at my end, I am improving my sense of communication with any person I'm dealing with?
Okay. So this has every therapist's favorite answer. It depends. It depends heavily on the relationship as well. In addition to the proximity of your relationship. So, for example, you will not deal with your estranged father the same way you would with your best friend, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't deal with it in the same way. So, I would say that one thing to remember is that you are only half of the equation. If the other person is not open to conversation, or maybe they don't even know how to have the conversation, there's no shame in you imposing boundaries there, so that you either limit the conversation or you limit the intensity of the conversation. So if, for example, if you're attempting to reconnect with a friend you lost touch with in over years and years, right? And this is someone you used to be good with. That conversation will obviously be very different than, say, like I said, an estranged parent. Do not guilt yourself if the relationship does not pan out the way that you are looking, because again, they have to make equal effort. It's only fair that there's equal effort. You cannot be the one always chasing up, hey, do you want to meet up? Hey, do you want to hang out? Hey, how was your day? No, because then, you're investing in a very one-sided dynamic. Healthy communication requires that there's reciprocation. And to go back to what I said earlier, if it's not serving you, you might want to reevaluate if this is something worth keeping. Because this is the part where most people get stuck. Well, I'm trying and I don't want to lose my friendship of 10 years. Well, yes, you were children back then, now you're adults, and some relationships fizzle out. Every relationship has an expiry date. Some of them obviously through death, just you die. But some of them, again, they just, your evolution, your growth, your change outmatches or outpaces the other person. And unless they make the effort to keep up, it's definitely a question worth having. Is it something that you are willing to invest or wait in. Because, again, investment is also quite timely, other than the fact that you are waiting, other than the fact that you are anticipating their response. So I would say, again, it depends heavily. If you want to improve your communication, it's not difficult for a therapist to help you learn how to improve your ability to basically have the other person understand. But to have them reciprocate, that's beyond both yourself and the therapist, right? That's beyond. And it's all right to acknowledge that and say, yeah, I guess they're not interested. It sucks for me. It hurts for me. But I did my part, so I don't have regrets. As long as there's no regrets, you're good to go.
Good enough. Moving to the conflicts and starting with my own example. Being a people pleaser, I try to let go of things. I try to let go of, I avoid conflicts. So I know that I'm self-aware of this problem that exists in mind, that I will let go of the minor things that would bother me from a person until it accumulates enough that the bubble bursts after a while. And it's usually burst at the time when the problem was not big enough, but the accumulation was big enough. So, but I do understand that
Right.
avoiding conflict would rather, worse the relationship that you have with anyone instead of building it up.
Yeah.
So, how
Yeah.
do we make sure that we are having a healthy conflict resolution with
Okay.
a partner, let's say?
Okay. So, okay. So I'll use the romantic connotation here. With, excuse me, with our partners, often what happens is that we devolve into a lot of, you did this, you said this, why are you like this? The what we would call very directed language. Why did you do this? Right? Now that in and of itself is an extremely aggressive, criticizing tone, which will merit the other person either becomes defensive, or what are you talking about? You did this, you did that. Or they become equally aggressive. Well, you're always like that. What about that? What are you going to do about that? It makes for an extremely negative exchange. If you want healthy conflict, what you should instead be leading with is, I feel X or I think Y, right? Why? Because what happens is when you lead with yourself, there's no criticism.
There's no
Honey,
attack.
there's no attack. At least there's no perceived attack, right? So if you say that, honey, I'm feeling like, that we're not really talking as much because every time you come home from work, you just kind of plop down on the couch and, I miss you. Can we do something about that? Do you feel that way too? Try and follow it up with a question as well when you make your point. I statements, I feel, I think, right? They're very powerful because they're designed to take away the sting of what would otherwise be a, you never do this. It's very easy to say, you don't care about us because you prefer the PlayStation or the TV. It's very easy to say that because that's venting your frustration in the most direct way. But if you just soften it a little and say, honey, I feel like we're not connecting as much, when you come home from work, and it upsets me. See, look, there it is again. Where's the attack? And their reaction is, really? I didn't know that. Or, really? You get upset? I don't think there was anything wrong. And because you're asking, do you feel that way? And if they say, it doesn't matter what they say, it's just the idea is to get them to talk to you, right? So I statements are super duper powerful. Having questions at the end of whatever you're saying as well, it takes away a lot of the sting because nobody can get mad at you for asking a question, right? Do you feel that way? Rather than saying, you do feel, you do this, you are this, you are lazy, you don't communicate. No. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's super important, and that's a learned behavior, by the way. Like saying, like I statements and adding a question at the end. That you have to practice this. This isn't really very natural in the sense that we don't talk like this. Therapists talk like this, but normal people don't. So and the thing is that when you start doing this, the other person will also generally become more relaxed around you because there's no conflict. They will be open to this, honey, can I talk to you? Yeah, sure, what's up? Because most of the time, if you say we need to talk, the other person just panics. At least I know I certainly panic when someone says we need to talk. So, it's once you understand that they will lead with I, and it just becomes a part of your normal lexicon, it becomes so easy to navigate conflict. There's no raising your voice. There's no name calling. Let's assume that doesn't work. Let's say the I statements don't work, right? Let's take that. There's no shame in saying, listen, this isn't working. I'm getting riled up. Maybe you're getting riled up. I don't want to say something I'll regret. I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to calm down, but I'm going to come back and we're going to deal with this. This is the part most people don't do. They're just like, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to calm down. And they say they'll come back and talk about it, but they never do.
Yeah.
And the problem is unresolved conflict always comes back much worse in some fashion, whether it's in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, it'll come back. Even that time you said we talk about it, you didn't talk about it. You're always like this, you don't do it. Right? So the idea is you have to go back to unresolved conflict. You have to. If you leave it unresolved, it will come back worse. So the thing is that that's also a part of unhealthy conflict. Most people think just yelling and name calling. No, leaving things unresolved, hanging in the air, or worse, brushing it under the carpet, it contributes more to undermining your communication than most other things. I would say that bad communication is the worst when you let it grow like this, right? So I would say that this is a few ways to navigate.
So I guess my next question would have been that how to keep managing the conflict resolution between them. I think the only answer would be practice. Practice more until you reach the point where you know how to have a healthy conflict management.
Not just that, actually. I'll add on to that something because which I just realized I didn't actually touch on. One thing a lot of couples tend to forget is that it's us versus the problem, not me and you versus the problem. The problem is with conflict, it becomes me versus you, and then whatever the problem is. But most people will only really focus on the fact that the problem exists. They will not actually come to the solution. Take a nice easy one. If we take healthy conflict, honey, every time I come home, the dishes aren't done, and when I come home, I'm really tired, and I really don't want to deal with this because I'm tired. Can we do something about this? Notice how there's no, how do you feel? What can we do about this? Right? You've already brought up a solution-minded approach. What can we do? Oh, honey, you know what? I'm so sorry. I was just kind of busy. I'll take care of it in a little bit. You just come home, you have your coffee, have your tea, whatever. Or alternatively, honey, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do this. I'm really caught up in a really urgent project. Is it okay if you do it? Notice what's happening. You're also bargaining again. There it is again, negotiable, right? But notice how you're trying to work out a solution. You're not blaming each other. You're not worried about the problem. You're just trying to find the solution. The more that you start to focus on the solution component, the more that your conflict navigation becomes easier. Assuming, of course, I statements and questions and, again, what can we do about this? Right? The only issue is sometimes where, someone might take it personally. You didn't do the dishes again? That's already a bad statement because you didn't do it again. The criticism is there, right? Whereas, oh, honey, I thought we talked about this. Come on, the dishes aren't done. What are we going to do about this? There it is again. What are we going to do about this? Even though it's not your problem, in the sense that you didn't cause it, but affects your partner, affects you. That's how it is. So make it an us issue, not a me versus you, right? So I would say that, not just practice, but also remembering this is your partner. This is not the enemy, right?
Something happens.
Hello. Yeah, no, happens sometimes. Internet's a little spotty. Happens. Like I was just about to highlight that practice is one thing, but also keeping in mind, keep a solution-focused mindset. That'll help you navigate it significantly more easily than you would otherwise.
Okay.
Right?
Good tips. Talking about conflicts or discussion or arguments between a couple, again, I will move it to the couple because usually you can talk about it with your potential partner. everyone would have a past, everyone would have different experiences, and unless, even though I think, even if you have done your trauma recovery, if you have gone through the process of healing, there still would be some pinch points that can trigger you, while the other person would have no clue why and how is it triggering you. So for starters, how do we make sure that communicating it, I think, comes to the second point, but how do we make sure that we are very well aware that a particular point actually is triggering us, or is it just the in the heat of the moment reaction, an anger reaction,
Okay.
or a reaction?
Okay. So I would preface the answer by saying that the word trigger does not mean what most people think it does, because it's kind of one of those words that's now just misused because of how frequently people love using it. The same way people like to toss around depression and OCD. So triggering, or being triggered, is a state of being where a certain stimulus makes you re-experience a previously experienced trauma, almost as if you're reliving the moment. So if let's take a hypothetical situation. Let's say that you're having a really bad argument with your partner, and he starts yelling at you, and he raises his voice, and you get triggered, mostly because this triggers a memory of when your father used to do this to you when you were 7. So this big man just towering over you, yelling, in your mind you're re-experiencing it, so then you start crying. Like, even though the argument does not merit crying, but you start crying because you're reliving trauma. You're reliving. That is a trigger. If you're asking about how does this differ from a otherwise typical normal reaction, a trigger reaction requires very specific stimulus. So it has to, like in this case, a tall man towering over you, yelling down at you, right? Whereas if it's just a woman yelling at you, nothing happens. But in both situations, if let's take away the trauma incident, and in both of them you just get angry because who are you to yell at me? That's a normal reaction, right? But it could also be, for example, if we take the yelling man, maybe somebody in if you go to Dubai Mall and maybe someone else is having an argument and they're yelling at someone else, it'll trigger you again, even though it's not aimed at you, right? That is a trigger. Right? So the best way to know the difference is there consistency, and is there any previous history with a very particular kind of behavior pattern which elicits a very particular response. If it's just, I'm pretty sure if you were being yelled at, you would get pretty irritated or angry, but not everyone would just burst into tears, right? So it's important to kind of navigate that difference that way. Again, sometimes some people are not aware of the trauma trigger, right? That's also a big problem because, do you always cry when someone yells at you? I've always been like this. No, you've been like this since you were about 5, 6 when your father instilled this in you. To go back again to what I said about attachment styles, what you grow up with normalizes your experience patterns, right? So if you grew up with being yelled at and you cry because children cry when they feel scared and nobody ever addressed it, then as an adult, it's still there, right? So it's super duper duper important to, again, I would say, consider, exploring these kind of adverse reactions with a therapist. Friends are helpful, don't get me wrong, they're very supportive and whatnot, but they often are not able to navigate the cognitive mental layers that are associated with this. So, again, my bias is showing, please consider a therapist. They're great at this stuff.
Consider a therapist. What are the signs? What are the signs that you can tell about yourself
Ooh.
and the next person that this is the time to see a therapist?
So the funny thing is, contrary to what a lot of people think, because I get this question a lot, like, oh, I was thinking about a therapist for 2 months and I finally came, or 2 years, or whatnot. And when they're like, what's the right time? Like, there is no right time, the same way there's no wrong time. Therapists, like myself or anyone else who's works in mental health this way, you don't need a diagnosis with us. You can just come in and talk about your problems without having to be slapped with, oh, you have GAD, or you have SAD, or you have this or that. No. So I have a lot of clients that come in and they're just like, I don't know how to navigate, having a really demanding work requirement. Like, I just have a really demanding job. How do I do this? I'm not going to tell them they're anxious. I'm not going to give them medication. I'm just going to be like, okay, let's navigate it. Where are the boundaries? What can you do? Where's the buffering? How do you engage with communication? Work-life boundaries, work balance boundaries rather, home life, friends, and bingo bango, you're done. So when's the right time to go to a therapist? Yesterday. So if you couldn't go yesterday, then think about it now. Now, I would also say that please do your research, because not all therapists practice in the same thing. I don't see children. I am not licensed for children. I do not like dealing with children. Anyone under 15, no, just leave my clinic. I will not deal with you. We all have very explicit limitations on our clinical skills. So shop around. It's super important that you find the therapist who understands what it is you're looking to address. If you have a journal, my favorite clients are the ones who come in with a little journal. Just, oh, great, you wrote stuff down. This is great. Not to say the others aren't valuable. Of course they are. But anyone who comes in with a plan or who comes in with that, it makes the sessions that much more meaningful, right? It's just talk. That's all we ask. It's up to us. If you come in and say, I don't know what to talk about, that's our problem. We will figure out a way around that. You just have to be there, right? So talk to your therapist, talk to potential therapists, ask them, explore, and shop around. That's the best thing you can do for yourself, because with therapy, everyone in your life benefits, especially you. Everyone will benefit, right? So yeah, when's the right time? Yesterday. Go if you didn't go yesterday, then think about when you can go next, right?
Time's short. We have spent almost over an hour, but I think I'll talk about
Right.
one key takeaway that I have taken out of this session. Is I think the realization that all of the healthy connections and relationships, they are deeply rooted in terms of open communication, genuine empathy with each other, understanding each other, and willingness, especially the willingness in navigating the
Oh yeah.
conflicts and with patience and with the mindful manner. But I think
Right.
they require consistent efforts. They require mutual understanding from
Yeah.
both the sides. It's not a one-way street. But with that,
You're
I'll be
right.
wrapping up today's episode, and I hope that everyone who joined would have found it as eye-opening as I did. Although we only talked about very building blocks of the relationship, from understanding the
Yeah.
dynamics to approaching the conflicts in a very healthy way. But then again, it's a lifelong skill that I think you will need to work on day by day.
Yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
grateful to
Yeah.
you, Bilal, for
Um,
joining and
well,
sharing
thank
such
you so much.
practical insights. I think I am getting out of this session with actionable insights to do more later in
Right.
my life. But for
Hmm.
everyone else who joined in, I think I'll encourage you to take one thing that you could relate in your personal life and try implementing it and see the magic happenings one day at a time. Maybe it could be
Hmm.
just as little as listening to the other person with intention, expressing more openly, and taking a moment before you respond to someone's sentence and try
Hmm.
to fill in their shoes and see their perspective. Although they are small efforts, but I think they would have big impact. So I just say thank you
Oh yeah.
everyone else for
Absolutely.
joining. If you found this episode helpful for yourself or for anyone who you think that might would get benefit out of it, do share this episode with them. I would love to hear your
Hmm.
thoughts, what resonated with you the most, and is there any other topic that you would like us to cover in future episodes? Feel free to connect
Hmm.
us on our socials, share your ideas. So until next time, I think
Hmm.
we'll try keep working on those connections and understand that the journey can be stronger, healthier. It's ongoing, but I
Hmm.
think every step forward would be worth it. So until next
Absolutely.
time, I hope to see you again. And until then, bye bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.